This is rare, but there are actually a couple players in Dynasty we are overpaying for, meaning we see their market value price. We are actually willing to do what we almost never do and take a value loss and overpay value loss because we believe that their value is going to go up year over year. We are so confident that we are willing to overpay. But Puka Nacua is a good example. Puka Nacua came out. He did everything you wanted to him as a rookie. I don't know. I mean, he broke almost every relevant rookie receiving record in the books. Came out, had an amazing rookie year on an offense where, with the Rams, you didn't really expect the Rams to do a lot last year. Nobody had really high expectations for that offense at all. Nobody from that offense was being drafted super high, except for Cooper Kupp in fantasy football. Matt Stafford, there were tons of questions around him. People didn't even know if he's going to have a healthy shoulder. And Puka Nacua came in and not only outperformed his 5th round NFL draft capital price, he won Rookie of the Year and broke almost every receiving record. And somehow still in Dynasty, you have people who are in our comments section, on Twitter, all these places saying that Puka Nacua, his value is overinflated, and this is you do not fluke into a season like this with these efficiency metrics. You don't. Yes, you could fluke into having that many yards and touchdowns. Yes, you could do that. But you're not really fluking your way into being 7th in the league in targets, 159 targets. We talk about the direct correlation between targets and fantasy points.
Targets and sustainability, too, because a lot of people are saying that this is Puka's ceiling.
And it's not. Puka Nacua last year, let's debunk that right now. 27th in total touchdowns, the most volatile of any fantasy stat, and any fantasy relevant stat is for sure touchdowns. They're worth a lot of points, 6 points each, and you can score a lot of them and get 100 extra points. You can score none of them and lose potentially 60 to 80 points, right? Puka Nacua produced and did not need touchdowns to do it. You're talking about a guy that was he had 159 targets last year. That was 7th in the league. He was 6th in target rate. He was 16th in air yards. He was 4th in receiving yards. He was 8th in receptions. He was 5th in yards after catch. And then as a result, 6th in fantasy points per game. 6th in points per game as a rookie on the Rams. On the Rams, guys. We looked at the Rams last year and everybody was like, the Rams. And then this guy comes out on the Rams and does this and everybody's just kind of like, I mean, this is a guy when you're looking at touchdown volatility and sustainability, for example. Jamar Chase is a good example of this. Look at Jamar Chase's rookie year in the NFL when he was a top 5 wide receiver in PPR leagues. Jamar Chase had 13 touchdowns. When Jamar Chase did not score 13 touchdowns the past 2 years or the 2 years after that, he was not a top 5 wide receiver. Still a great wide receiver. Still in the top 12. Not a top 5 wide receiver. Why? Because Jamar Chase's top 5 upside is dependent on how many touchdowns he scores. Jamar Chase is not the type of receiver with his play style that's going to be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver with 6 touchdowns. Puka Nacua is the type of player and the type of asset in Dynasty that will be a top 5 scoring wide receiver with 4 to 6 touchdowns. And that screams sustainability. That screams safety. And it's as important to us as almost any other factor when you're considering wide receivers that there is. Mm-hmm. It's why Amon-Ra is elite, right? Amon-Ra, elite at drawing targets. Now he's super versatile, can do anything. I mean, the best of the best, Justin Jefferson, gets a lot of targets, does not need touchdowns to produce. Just absolutely does not need touchdowns to produce. CeeDee Lamb, ironically enough, had touchdowns and had receptions. But CeeDee Lamb is a guy that is so good at doing that, it doesn't really matter. For a guy like this, you look at a guy even similar to Michael Pittman. They both drew like 155 to 160 targets last year.
Yep.
And they both do a lot of things similarly, right? We talk about Michael Pittman, he's the Colts wide receiver 1. He's not a wide receiver 1, like a 1 in the NFL, as Chris Ballard wants to call it. He's not
an alpha.
And really, what he lacks, Puka Nacua makes up for. Puka Nacua is Michael Pittman in the sense that he gets open, he's a good route runner, he makes tons of catches on tons of targets, and he's got a lot of yak ability, but he's also an over-the-top threat, and he's also an X.
Threat. Yep.
I don't know what else we want to see. I mean, I can read you some efficiency statistics here. They shouldn't have to. 6th in yards per route run, 6th in formation adjusted yards per route run, right? 6th in juke rate. He was also, believe it or not, if you want proof that drops don't matter. He was 1st in the league in drops last year. He had 10 drops. But 10 drops, it doesn't matter when you get 159 targets, right?
No. And honestly, I love that you brought up the Michael Pittman comp because I've always struggled with what type of receiver is Puka like outside of Deebo Samuel? And I would say he is the best of Michael Pittman and Deebo Samuel.
Those
two guys put together, the targets plus the after catchability and the athleticism.
And if you say that's overstating Puka Nacua, I'm telling you, like,
did you
watch his film? Please, I'm pleading with you to watch his film.
He got more versatile too because he was Michael Pittman to begin the season. He was pretty much exclusively slot, and he did have some yak stuff. And then they started lining him up on the outside towards the second half of the season, and that's when he started to shine once Cooper Kupp was back, because you saw that dip in production slightly when Kupp came back, or a little more inconsistency, and then later on he started getting more production downfield. And with Deebo Samuel, like we talked about yards after the catch, 9th in yards after the catch, just ahead of Michael Pittman. Puka Nacua 5th in yards after the catch. Like, you're getting all this yak ability from Puka Nacua, just like Deebo, with twice the targets.
Not to mention one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Matt Stafford is one of the best passers in the league.
Yeah.
Like, stop.
And that'll be the big counterpoint. So outside of the counterpoint for Puka Nacua being that this is his production ceiling, which we already debunked based on the safety and the sustainability of what he got last year, the other argument is Matt Stafford. The volatility of Matt Stafford. What's going to happen? Is he going to get hurt? Is he going to retire? Well, I can tell you based on his contract that he is not incentivized to ever retire. I'm kidding. He's not incentivized to retire for the next couple of years because he's literally making $50+ million a year.
And look, had Matt Stafford retired, this would be a different discussion, because when you watch the film, their chemistry is undeniable.
Yes.
And it's a big part of Puka Nacua's play.
Huge part. But I will say, if you're concerned about Matt Stafford going down this year, I know Jimmy Garoppolo is really unpopular right now, but we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo help sustain multiple high-producing assets in an offense, and he is the backup there, if you are concerned about that.
Let's talk about the two assets you just mentioned, though, Deebo Samuel and Michael Pittman. Both had seasons where Deebo played with Jimmy G, and Michael Pittman played with Gardner Minshew. And what happened? They were both still productive, right? Because these types of wide receivers are typically quarterback-proof. But we're fretting over something, and we're adjusting dynasty value or lowering him in our ranks over something completely hypothetical.
We're fretting over a hypothetical versus something that's real, and that is production that Jamar Chase has never accomplished. By the way, which I think the season between Chase and Puka was pretty similar in terms of production, right? Yes, I believe
302 points his rookie year, and then you were looking at Puka.
He had 298, so the same.
So yes, but with that being said, we are make a numerical, statistical argument that Puka Nacua is overvalued in Dynasty. Do it in the comments if you want to try. We will listen.
Outside of, like, you just don't think it's going to happen again,
because that's really the only way that you could convince me that he's not elite, because his film is ridiculous. It's actually good.
Yes.
I'm not, and it's not me watching film and being like, oh, look at this. I've watched other people watch his film that have pointed things out. It's like, okay, this is sustainable. Puka Nacua, I'll overpay for right now. I will go trade. I mean, you're looking at the guys in that range right now. The running backs, I'll take Puka Nacua over any of those running backs, right?
Well, and in startups too, he's not normally going early second. I will strongly consider / take him a lot of the times in the early second.
In the early second, you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. going over him. I would take Puka at the moment. You've got Bijan. Is that crazy?
No, it's not crazy. It's not crazy, and people will think it's crazy.
It's not, guys. If Marvin Harrison Jr. has the season Puka did, then Marvin Harrison Jr. is another outlier. He really is. And yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. could do that, but he hasn't. You've got one that's proven that he could do it, and one that could potentially do it. The hypothetical is playing so much into these values right now. And
if Marvin Harrison Jr. as a rookie produces the wide receiver 4 overall, he would be the dynasty wide receiver 1 going into his second year.
And he would be going mid-first in
so
dynasty
why is
startups.
Puka not?
So Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Garrett Wilson, Christian McCaffrey, A.J. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, all of them. Puka. I would pay those guys plus a second. More to get Puka Nacua. Okay, you build your dynasty team around Puka Nacua. Any other receiver, had JSN had this season, we've said this, had JSN had this season,
would have been the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty.
He would be right up there with CeeDee Lamb. No, absolutely no question. It's because the name, the draft capital, and the hypothetical around the Matt Stafford scaries, and it's dumb.
We don't like being wrong in the Dynasty community, and
we
everyone was wrong. Even the people that were on Puka Nacua, which was us, never would have guesstimated that he would have done this.
Absolutely,
we were all wrong to an extent.
Yes.
T. Higgins is going to be our next guy here. This is
the biggest buy in Dynasty right now,
potentially. Wide receiver
I think so.
26 right now, value equivalent to guys like Saquon Barkley, who I like at price right now. Value equivalent to Zay Flowers, who I'm kind of iffy about in price right now in Dynasty. Value equivalent to gosh, help me out. Who else? Kyle Pitts,
JJ
Mark
McCarthy.
Andrews, JJ McCarthy.
Late
Look,
first.
we know what T. Higgins is. I can read you T. Higgins targets, and you know what he is. Rookie season, 108 targets. 110. Last year, 76 because he only played 12 games. He was on pace for about 110 targets.
But he's that 100 to 115 target player, right?
Yes.
Wide receiver, when he's the wide receiver 2 on a team. If T. Higgins were to go somewhere else, obviously that would probably change. But this is the player he is.
And that is case in point why we love T. Higgins' price right now at wide receiver 26, is there are so many wide receivers going ahead of him, well ahead of him in Dynasty right now, who get consistently the same amount of targets and production and are priced higher. And that are just as unproven, or more unproven, because T. Higgins has actually been a mid-wide receiver too. And for Higgins, it's that, plus, like you said, he will be on a different team next year. They have made it clear, the Bugles have made it clear that they are not going to pay T. Higgins. He will be on the open market going into 2025. And what does the Dynasty community feel about T. Higgins? The same way that they felt about DJ Moore for 5 years before he actually produces a wide receiver 1. He's just one of those guys. Because, to be honest, the talent is absolutely undeniable. When you watch T. Higgins on the field, you're like, holy crap, that is a guy who could absolutely be a wide receiver 1.
He could.
He's just never been put in the situation where he could be. So I'm not even here to bet and estimate when I think T. Higgins will be a wide receiver 1, if ever.
Doesn't matter.
It's a lot easier to predict what the Dynasty community is going to think and feel about a player like T. Higgins going into the open market, going into a situation where he could be the alpha wide receiver 1, the number 1 target, and his price will skyrocket. It'll skyrocket. To me, it's not a question with this price. At 25 years old, he'll be 26 going into next season, entering the prime of his career.
I mean, let's look at the guys in front and behind his value right now, and let's talk about who we'd even pay. Like, JSN is ranked 2 spots ahead of T. Higgins. I'm tempted to take T. Higgins there. I'm tempted to down tier to T. Higgins and be very comfortable with that. And I like JSN. Yeah. George Pickens is right next to T. Higgins. You're talking about the wide receiver 2 on Joe Burrow's offense versus George Pickens, who either A, best case scenario, Russell Wilson's throwing him the ball, or B, they take Justin Fields off of special teams and he throws the ball to him. Yikes. And then you've got 3 rookies, Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey. Unproven guys. Yes, of course they all have upside. Of course. But, of those guys right there, Brian Thomas is maybe the only one with wide receiver 1 upside, and he barely possesses that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Look, even guys ahead. Tank Dell is 5-6 spots ahead of T. Higgins. I mean, he is Houston's wide receiver 2, maybe Houston's wide receiver 3. And you've got Joe Burrow's wide receiver 2, 5-6 spots behind him. I honestly straight up would take T. Higgins probably over Tank Dell right now in Dynasty, and there's a big value gap. And I honestly think this price is a little bit overinflated. And our ADP that we've gathered, he's lower than this. Yes. We've seen him go as late as mid-6th. Mm-hmm. Yep. You see some of the tight ends going over him that shouldn't be going over him. I would take him over Kelsey, and I like Travis Kelsey. Yep. But Kelsey has been consistently going over him in some of our mock drafts. Keon Coleman has been going in that range. Ladd McConkey and Jaden Reed. I like Jaden Reed a lot. I like Rashee Rice a lot. It's T. Higgins for me.
I think you're going to notice here that there's a trend with the list of guys that we have here, and that is value upside opportunity over the next 9 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Where there is almost in our opinion, without a shadow of a doubt, a likelihood that they are going to increase in value given what their current production is and what it could be in the future, or just what the Dynasty community is going to do with their price. It's very easy, especially with a guy like T. Higgins, to predict that. Dalton Kincaid is another one of those cases, and I'll kind of let you take it off here and why we love him so much.
I mean, you're talking about an offense where Stephon Diggs, and you're looking at Stephon Diggs' target share over the last couple of years. Even when Stephon Diggs sucked, his target share was high. Last year, Stephon Diggs...
We are not playing the vacated volume fallacy, by the way.
No, we are not, and I'm going to get there. But even when Stephon Diggs sucked last year, he was 6th in targets, 9th in target share. He was 13th in target rate. This is a guy that still was getting a ton of volume. Mm-hmm. Stephon Diggs is gone. And that does not necessarily mean that you're going to get, I don't know, Khalil Shakir with a bunch of receptions. Or you're going to get, who's the other guy in that offense? Curtis Samuel, a bunch of receptions.
Chase Claypool. resurgence.
Because what basically what the vacated volume fallacy is, and why it doesn't apply here, is the vacated volume fallacy applies vacated volume to players who, as talents, aren't going to command that level of target share, even if that target share is available to them. What you see is you see other players, the other category on our target share research, so guys that aren't fantasy relevant, come in and take 30 to 50% of those targets. 50 is the higher end of that number for teams like the New England Patriots last year, where there were very little fantasy relevant assets. You saw these non-fantasy relevant players take a bunch of these targets. And so the reason that the vacated volume fallacy is not being applied here is because the vacated volume fallacy in this scenario would suggest that there are wide receivers at the wide receiver position that, because Stephon Diggs, who is a wide receiver at the wide receiver position, left, they're going to get the targets. When in reality, the way to promptly avoid falling for the vacated volume fallacy is to rank opportunity and projected opportunity by talent. And the most talented pass catcher and the most talented slot wide receiver in Buffalo is Dalton Kincaid. They drafted him to be that. And yes, immediately last year, was he amazing? No. And even just 2 years ago, the narrative was we have to be patient with tight ends. We have to be patient with rookie tight ends. They don't produce after 3 years. Now you've seen a handful of tight ends come in. But Dalton Kincaid, a guy that by most standards had a solid year for a rookie tight end, but because he didn't score Sam Laporta numbers, everybody's like, he didn't do anything. Yep. He didn't not do anything. He was productive at the end of the year and into the playoffs. And you watched him on the field, and he was a very good NFL tight end that actually started scoring fantasy points. Somebody commented once and said, yeah, Dalton Kincaid can't score without touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid had like 3 or 4 double-digit games without touchdowns.
That was the huge case that I was going to make here. He only had 2 touchdowns on the entire season. The games where he didn't have touchdowns, where he scored double digits, were 18 points, 14 points, 11, 13, 21, 19.
I mean, Dalton Kincaid was he was second in slot snaps. I talk about him being a slot. He's second among tight ends in slot snaps last year, 11th in route runs. But when you're talking about his being a tight end 1, which tight end 1 doesn't mean a lot, but with his opportunity share last year, and him being 14th in target share in the league among tight ends, even on a team where he was technically like the second most talented wide receiver, you still had Dawson Knox in there getting a fair amount of snaps.
It's top 3 to 4 upside.
His average up to target last year was 28th among tight ends, 6 yards. So what kind of targets was Dalton Kincaid getting last year? He was getting short to intermediate range targets and occasionally some red zone targets. He had 9 red zone targets, which was 16th. So the most volatile stat that we always talk about is touchdowns. He was 27th in the league among tight ends in touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns. He's still a wide receiver, he's still a tight end 1. A guy that now is the most talented pass catcher in Buffalo. And you're getting him where? Into the 4th, into the early 5th, probably in Dynasty.
About the late 4th of this round. Yeah.
And here's the 2 things we know about tight ends. Number 1, when they perform at a high level, they are quick to jump up in dynasty startups.
Yes, because there's so few of them.
There's so few of them. They're so scarce. But the other thing is, once they get to the top of dynasty startups, like once they get past like the 4th round, their value is usually pretty insulated. Because people know that the lifespan of a tight end is going to be a lot longer than that of even a wide receiver or a running back. And people know that over the course of many years, we've seen tight ends maintain their value in Dynasty at a very high rate. And so with Dalton Kincaid, it's like you're betting that he is the most talented guy there. And when you do, if he goes up, you won big time in Dynasty from a value standpoint. You won big time because now he's up there, and he's probably going to stay there as well. I mean, I think it's a no-brainer, and I think he's the most talented pass catcher in Buffalo.
He's the perfect fit for the type of offense that they're going to run this year. The perfect fit,
which is not your typical Buffalo Bills offense either.
No.
You saw that last year, the last half of the year.
But it's going to become typical because they weren't able to win previously.
Exactly.
So they're trying a whole new thing.
They're trying to something actually successful, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Another guy that's a perfect fit for his offensive situation, I think, personally, is Kendre Miller. This is not necessarily what I feel about Kendre Miller, the talent. I honestly don't think he has very much production upside down the line. This is all a market value play. And to me, I see the Zamir Whites of the world. I see the Alexander Madisons of the world. I see, even committee backfield guys like Tyjae Spears and Jalen Warren, those types of running backs that have less team investment overall and have skyrocketed up boards once the lead dominant running back leaves that offense via retirement or trade or free agency or whatever. Kendre Miller, it will take 2 20-plus point games this year for him to skyrocket up boards. I'm willing to bet that that's going to happen pretty easily because he didn't do anything last year. It's his turn. He's the next man up.
I think he has 1-2 touchdown game and he's the top 30-day riser on Keep Trade.
Yes. To me, it's not even a question. We know how the Saints run their offense, and that's with Alvin Kamara, and then the second running back who gets a majority of the bulk of the carries and goal line opportunities, and Mark Ingram. Right? Remember Mark Ingram and how productive he was in splurts at times, and he did have a significant amount of value at a point in time. So with Kendre Miller, look, I'm not even going to tell you what my personal opinion is of him long term. Actually, I think I did earlier, but all that to say, don't even listen to that. Ignore it.
Who cares?
Listen to what the Dynasty community has told you time and time and time and time and time again, is that they will always and forever commit the vacated volume fallacy. And when Alvin Kamara is out after this year, Kendre Miller is going up. He's going up.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about... Actually, you talk about Deebo. Deebo's your guy, so go ahead.
Deebo is my guy. I love me some Deebo Samuel. And to me, Deebo Samuel is an easy case of, do you want to win your league?
I do.
Do you want to win your league?
Yeah.
Do you want to score fantasy points in your Dynasty league, win championships, and win money?
Yes.
Do you think it's cool?
Yes.
We think it's cool. We think money is really cool. And to me, Deebo Samuel is consistently contributing to that, and he is probably the highest contributor at his respective price compared to anyone else going in his range. Next to maybe Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce's price is at least somewhat understandable, even though we think he's kind of a buy too. Deebo Samuel's 28 years old, and I understand that he gets banged up. I understand that every single year he misses about 2 games. So does George Kittle. George Kittle wins the leagues too. I mean, this could easily be a video about George Kittle too. Deebo Samuel last year had 90 targets, 60 receptions, 892 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, and was the wide receiver 15 on a PPR basis.
Jeez.
That is unfair. That is broken. You can say, yeah, that's not sustainable.
Okay. We would agree that normally that wouldn't be sustainable, right?
At a certain price. But his price is so reasonable, and it's Deebo Samuel. He runs the freaking football.
Yeah.
He's a running back and a wide receiver. He's like Christian McCaffrey. Oh, funny, they're on the same team. But like they flip. Like McCaffrey is still majority running back, Deebo's still majority receiver, but it's like 60-40 split for both of those guys, which is why they can be so efficient and so productive and honestly so complementary together.
The one argument you could make against us, which would make sense, is like, okay, guys, this is a wide receiver that was 44th in targets last year. He had 89 targets.
Yep.
And what I would say to you and what Nathan would say to you is he's a unicorn. There are unicorns. They exist. I know they were like fairy tales in that everybody, when they were kids, they were like, think of a unicorn, and they're like, oh, it's just this thing imaginary in fairy tales. No, there's an actual, like Deebo Samuel's an actual unicorn. Like special fit helmet for the horn, everything.
Yes.
Because you're talking about, like Nathan said, a guy that can be used as a running back, right? A guy that is used as a running back. A guy that's a gadgety guy, a super athletic gadgety guy in an offense where you have a very high level of creativity.
Yep.
Like you talk about the Shanahan style offense, this is the Shanahan offense. As in Kyle Shanahan. As in, remember how like all of the Dolphins players talk about their athleticism and their versatility and how that could potentially lead to creative ways to being used. That's this. Deebo Samuel invented that. I mean, Kyle Shanahan has used him masterfully. And the result of that is a ton of fantasy points.
Yep.
And yes, the sustainability, I don't know. The injuries, yeah. The price, woo! Wow. That, you get Deebo where, in the 6th or 7th round?
Easy.
Heck yeah, dude.
I mean, I can list a couple of guys that I would much rather have. I mean, it's not even close. His price, right? George Pickens is so far and away more valuable than him right now. He's going around Will Levis. He's going around Josh Jacobs. Keon Coleman, unproven. Rashad White, we like Rashad White.
So that's the end of the 7th.
Yeah. Trey Benson. Trey Benson isn't even going to start this year.
We
He's
like
a late
Trey Benson.
3rd-round pick, and I like Trey Benson. Mike Evans. I mean, talk about volatility, dude. Like production volatility, touchdowns. Whoo!
Even Baker, like go get a better quarterback 3.
Oh my gosh.
Get Deebo on your team.
Oh my gosh, dude.
I mean, we're talking about upside. So especially in formats where you're only starting 7, 8 players, even start 9s. Deebo becomes so valuable in those formats.
Yes.
Because you are shooting for weekly upside. If you're playing in Dynasty Best Ball leagues, I'm not having a Dynasty Best Ball league without Deebo. I'm not.
Nope.
Because the guy can score, even though he has weeks where he scores 10 points, 8 points, whatever. He has weeks where he scores 40 points. If you watch Deebo's film, like, you know that he hasn't really slowed down. He does have to stay out of injury trouble. I agree with that. But I love his price right now, and I think Nathan makes great points there. Anthony Richardson. Let's get into some quarterbacks now.
QB time. Woo! This applies to 1 QB too, by the way. Anthony Richardson is a good value in 1 QB.
Anthony Richardson doesn't have to be a productive passer to be fantasy relevant. How do I know this? Because Justin Fields was fantasy relevant. That's how I know it. We saw it. We saw that you can be the worst passer in the NFL, the worst fourth quarter passer I've ever seen in my life, and still be fantasy productive. Not only fantasy productive, he can be fantasy productive enough to be a top 12 pick in dynasty startups when he shouldn't have been. And so Anthony Richardson is. And I think the reason for that, and it is good reason, is that we know that Anthony Richardson can suck throwing the football and still be valuable in fantasy and in dynasty, right? But people are running with the narrative. There are a lot of people that are running with the narrative like, okay, Anthony Richardson's overvalued from an NFL QB perspective. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going out and saying that Anthony Richardson as a passer has proven himself, has shown what he can do, has shown that he's going to be safe. Like,
I mean, he has in flashes, and it's pretty exciting. But
he
that aside,
has,
that
but
aside.
you have to see consistency, and we haven't seen that. Anthony Richardson's proven almost nothing besides he has potential. Potential, you know what that means? It's a fancy word for saying you haven't done crap yet. And Anthony Richardson, he really hasn't done anything yet. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he's done anything yet. When you're talking about the offensive system that he's in and the offensive coach that he's playing with, coupled with the weapons that are around him, Jonathan Taylor makes Anthony Richardson better. Why? Defenses have to respect Jonathan Taylor. Imagine being a linebacker and being like, okay, I've got Jonathan Taylor there, and I've got Anthony Richardson there. Good luck. Good luck with that. So that helps both of it. It helps Jonathan Taylor as well. Anthony Richardson last year, you saw him play in like half games. Like his production last year, you've got it up. Like half games where he scored like 21 points.
He played 33% of the snaps in the Houston game week 2. He scored 17 points in 2 minutes.
Here's what we have with Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson was 7th in the league in rushing touchdowns last year, and he played 4 games. 7th.
3.5.
He scored a rushing touchdown per game. I don't think that's 6 extra points per game, meaning he can throw and be as a passer have 14 points per game and still average 20 a game as a fantasy asset if he averages. Not to mention he could do less than that. He could honestly have 12 points per game as a passer, have what would it be? 20, 30, 40 yards on the ground and then a rushing touchdown.
Yes.
If he averages that, we see this with Jalen Hurts. We see it with Lamar. We've seen it with Justin Fields. When you have the rushing upside, it is a lot easier to be an elite scoring fantasy asset than it is if you don't. A lot easier.
Yep. And to me, the comforting thing to see here, even in a small sample size, I understand we're extrapolating this to a larger sample size. So you take this with a grain of salt, obviously. We're taking this with a grain of salt. He played 2 full games. In those games, his passing attempts were 37 passing attempts. His first game ever, 37 passing attempts. And then in week 4 against the Rams, 25 passing attempts. In the 2 other games where he played part of the snaps, that was a third of the snaps, he had 10 passing attempts and 12 each.
So he was on
he
pace
averaged
for
30 passing attempts per game.
And
in a limited sample. But what I'm saying is that we have seen it in a couple games already that even if you took away some of the rushing, he still can be productive with the passing volume.
I don't even care about the passing. I really don't. Like,
He still can.
For Anthony Richardson, it's like, can he be a good enough passer or a decent enough passer to maintain his job for 3 to 4 years in the NFL?
Just to get by.
Because the Colts aren't going to give up on him until 3 to 4 years from now. So you're talking about a dynasty lifetime. The amount of points he's going to score, it's going to far outweigh any risk that comes with him as a passer, because in all honesty, we're Colts fans, right? Colts fans our entire lives. The Colts are in on Anthony Richardson. They're not going to give up quickly. And so for Anthony Richardson, take advantage of the points. Take advantage of the top 4 quarterback production upside that he has. He really does. If he stays healthy a full season, I have no doubt. He will do that. No. And I don't care if he's a good passer.
Nope.
Like, I can take advantage of the points for 1 year or 2 years, and then if I feel like, okay, he's not a good enough passer to succeed in the NFL, I'll sell him then.
Maybe he's a sell.
Because we saw it with Justin Fields. We saw the rushing upside. He wasn't a good enough passer. His value was still high in Dynasty. You can do the same thing with Anthony Richardson here.
Yep. Yes, Jared Goff is our next guy here. And to me, Jared Goff is like the best value at production-wise where you know what you're going to get from him at the quarterback position. There are other quarterbacks going ahead of him. See Dak, see Lawrence, see Purdy that are much more expensive than him, even with the new contract, and they're going to get about as much producing. You don't believe me? Let me just tell you. Jared Goff this year, 605 passing attempts, 407 completions, 4,500 yards, 30 touchdowns. In 2022, he had 587 attempts, 382 completions, 4,400 yards, and 29 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence just skyrocketed up boards because of his new contract.
Congrats.
564 passing attempts, 370 completions, 21 touchdowns. 584 passing attempts, 387 completions, 25 touchdowns, and just over 4,000 yards both years. Goff's beating him out at every single metric. Every single one. Now, the big difference is the rushing upside. Lawrence has significant rushing upside. Yeah. Like, very notable. Quite a bit more than I expected, honestly, especially last year.
Yeah.
So that is why it kind of evens out. But again, I think I'd rather take my investment in a guy who's cheaper in Jared Goff and get an elite wide receiver up where Lawrence is going right now.
Last guy is Jermaine Burton. We talked about T. Higgins and how he's probably not going to play for the Bengals. If he doesn't, Jermaine Burton's a wide receiver too. I'd overpay for him right now easy.
Yep.
Absolutely, I would. All right. Make sure if you play Dynasty, you drop a like on this video and make sure you subscribe. Make sure you head to flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain, choose the motherflocker tier. You get a team blueprint, comprehensive multi-year review for your Dynasty team to get you a team archetype, to get you a 3-year outlook, and to get you making trades that will help you meet your goals for your Dynasty team. We help you do that personally. Flockfantasy.com/domain. Like I said, code domain, motherflocker tier. Appreciate you guys. See you later.